Hey, how's it going, everybody? Shaun here from Zoobox, and today, for our daily movie review, we're going to be talking about Terminator Dark Fate, the sixth movie in the Terminator franchise. Well, technically the sixth movie, but it's really the third movie. This is one of these times where they've decided to disregard all of the other sequels in the series and start fresh with a fresh Terminator 3. This is the first time that James Cameron has kind of come back into the fold as with direct influence. He has been supportive of the other movies, Terminator 3, Salvation, Terminator Genesis. He even did like a big promo reel for Terminator Genesis. If you remember when Terminator Genesis came out, all the previews were of James Cameron talking about like, this is gonna knock your socks off. They've come up with something really cool. He did a very similar thing with Dark Fate here, but at least this time he was intimately involved. The film was directed by Tim Miller, who previously had directed Deadpool. I believe this is his second movie. It's written by James Cameron. He wrote the story. David S. Goyer, Tim Miller, and others. It stars Linda Hamilton, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Mackenzie Davis, Natalie Reyes, Gabriel Luna, Diego Boneta, and others. The synopsis is: an augmented human and Sarah Connor must stop an advanced liquid Terminator from hunting down a young girl whose fate is critical to the human race. Oh my goodness, what an original story. What an original story to go with for your sixth entry into a franchise. I've grew up with the Terminator movies. The first and second one, obviously, big fans. Some of the first movies I kind of have like cognizant memory of watching, especially Terminator 2. It was probably the first one I saw. My parents used to indulge me as a child, and we used to rent Terminator 2 all the time. I used to watch it all the time. And back then, there wasn't streaming services. There wasn't, not everybody owned every movie that came out. So we'd rent it. I'd make my parents rent it. This and Pippi Longstocking, if you can believe that. So it was Terminator 2 and Pippi Longstocking. That's what I was raised on. That's why I'm a cool kid. So this is an interesting movie. If you go back to one of I think the fourth or fifth of Zoobox Goes to the Movies, my brother Dan and I, old Danimal, we talked about this movie when it came out. We both went to go see it. Both kind of Terminator fans. Not to say that we've been Terminator fans of the entire franchise. Like I said, it's kind of like the first and second one. Those are the good ones. And then everything else kind of always felt like a mistake. Like Terminator 2 is the perfect ending to this series. There was nowhere else to go. And that is evident in the sequels because they really had to struggle to figure out how they would continue the story, what new perspectives they could bring. There just wasn't a lot there because, the older movies are more part of a grand sci-fi tradition. They are more about the allegory, more about the metaphor, more about the philosophical questions that were raised by the story and about artificial intelligence and about our place in the world, Famously, Terminator 2 ends with the quote, there is no fate but what we make. And then every other movie that came out after that completely undermined that ending, which was always a bummer. So when I heard they were doing Terminator Dark Fate, I was definitely curious. It's interesting to bring Cameron back. It's interesting to bring Linda Hamilton back. Schwarzenegger coming back, of course, because you can't keep Schwarzenegger out of a Terminator movie. Not if you tried. And so I was cautiously optimistic. I remember watching a press conference when they announced the movie with Tim Miller and James Cameron, and it seemed like they were their hearts were right in the right place. Their heads were in the right place. They wanted to do something that would like kind of honor the legacy, honor the story, but then at the same time, there isn't really much you can do with it. So I was very curious. I was curious what they would do. And so what happened was, and if you go back and listen to that earlier Zoobox Goes to the Movie episode, they made a serviceable action movie. I would not say this is a good Terminator sequel. I would say that it's in the pantheon of action movies, especially in the modern era. I would say this is a serviceable, passive watch. But as a Terminator fan, it's mildly infuriating. It's not very good. Linda Hamilton coming back to this. Wild miscalculation on her part. I don't know if it was just because of the people involved or she needed some money or whatever. I know that's, that's cynical, that's pedantic view, but I was just like, I couldn't help but after watching it tonight, I was kind of like, oh wow, like you've almost sullied the legacy of the character, and I don't normally react that way. It's kind of strange. I don't normally feel that way. And then I was talking to somebody on Facebook, somebody that will be on a future episode of Zoobox Goes to the Movies, Carpenter Boys for Life. We're gonna be talking about John Carpenter movies. But he kind of like he said that anybody that describes a character as badass is kind of already off on the wrong foot, and that kind of made me think. I was like, yeah, they do. They kind of look at these characters as kind of like monolithic cartoons. They're static. They're not people, and that stops them from being interesting because you can only take kind of a monolith so far. There's only so many things you can do with that. Because Sarah Connor is one of the great science fiction characters of all time. Kind of like she stands next to like somebody like Ellen Ripley. I mean, and the thing that makes Sarah Connor interesting was her journey, was her humanity, and it's even grounded in kind of a more of a realistic sense. Like Terminator: Dark Fate was like watching a Saturday morning cartoon version of the Terminator. Like if they had later on, like a few years later, as was at the time, if you remember in the 80s and 90s, they used to make cartoons out of every rated R franchise for kids. So there was a Rambo cartoon, there was a RoboCop cartoon, and this felt like it would be kind of in a similar vein. It would be kind of an extension of that. These are not interesting people. They're archetypes. And Sarah Connor has been completely stripped of her humanity. She's like a cartoon character. She's like a Clint Eastwood or like an old man, old woman type thing. I mean, this is the problem also, I would say, with just like modern filmmaking in general, when they deal with like powerful, strong women, is that they turn them into dudes. They just turn them into dudes, and that's just not interesting, especially with somebody like Sarah Connor. If you look back on like her character's journey throughout Terminator and Terminator 2, and the amount of like kind of pathos and humanity, the logical steps where she got from one place to the next, that growth is there. It makes sense. It doesn't feel dissonant. And then you get to Terminator Dark Fate, and like you can say like, oh, okay, well it's many years later, a lot of different life experiences, but the life experiences that she describes are cartoonish. Because if you don't know, spoiler alert, this will be full of spoilers. John Connor dies in the early goings of the movie. They have a flashback, takes place shortly after Terminator 2. Apparently there was another Terminator that was sent back as well that looked like Arnold Schwarzenegger, comes and basically just murks John Connor. He just dies. And that sends her down this path of being kind of a Terminator assassin, because there are other Terminators out in the world. Which, in some respects, it kind of made sense. Like, why would you only send back one Terminator at a time to do the job? So there I was like, okay, I can follow you there. But this kind of cartoonish ambition she has, and the way her character expresses her motivation and why she is that way is just not interesting or deep or anything. It's just all surface level. And because if you can go back and watch those old movies, while there is a cool superficial plot that's just engaging and interesting on that level, like the characters are really what make it. And the Sarah Connor especially, it's really rooted in her character and her sacrifice. And what they've done here is turn her into action woman, old action woman. Like, she's going to get her Liam Neeson time. She's going to get her, like I said, Clint Eastwood time, her Keanu Reeves time. Like, this is time for her to be a badass. And she's doing things in here that cartoon characters do. Like, if I do have a criticism about the action scenes, like they have no sense of reality, no sense of groundedness, no sense of like kind of just basic physical logic, And that's, I think, something that plagues modern movies in general. Because like we're talking about the Terminator. Go back and watch Terminator 2. Go watch those action scenes. All practical, all amazing, all interesting, all feel like they could happen in some respect, right? I mean, granted, they're kind of the hyperbolic versions of something that would happen, but like it still feels like it's grounded. It feels like it's really there. It's happening. In this movie, you get a lot of like kind of just weightlessness and CGI stuff. There is some cool stuff in there. Don't get me wrong. I think that if anything works about this movie, it's a lot of the set pieces are actually pretty good. It's just everything in between the set pieces that is awful. The character development, the dialogue. The dialogue is atrocious. Just like eye roll inducing, especially Sarah Connor. And that's why I keep just like, I just feel so bad dogging on Linda Hamilton because she doesn't do much these days in terms of an actress, right? And I think it kind of shows. But she also wasn't given anything to work with. I would not actually lay the blame at her feet. They gave a very simplistic, cartoonish version of Sarah Connor, and that's what she delivered on. It's very much a modern action movie. So it was interesting because when I was thinking back to like, the press conference I had watched and the way they were kind of setting up this movie as being kind of adhering to the legacy of the franchise, of the first two movies rather, not necessarily the whole franchise, but the first two movies. And then you watch this and there's just nothing like that at all. I mean, those older Terminator movies, Terminator 1, Terminator 2, they're rich character pieces amidst an interesting action sci-fi movie. And this is the opposite of that. It's got some really well executed set pieces with very two-dimensional, flat, kind of uninteresting characters. And it sucks too because it's got a good cast and people are really trying. There's an effort behind this. You could tell they had fun making it. But it does not read on screen as deep or interesting, and it's like I said, it's not the actor's fault. It's definitely the writing. The script of this is, from what I can see on screen, I have not taken the time to go read the screenplay, but the script is awful. It's fucking awful. It's contrived. Like I said, the dialogue is atrocious, and it's always drawing attention to itself in the worst possible ways. I mean, one of the worst decisions of this movie is to have Linda Hamilton say the words, "I'll be back." Not only is it like just hacked to do that, it's delivered poorly. So that was a huge problem I had. Just the moment to moment dialogue, any of the exposition. And almost like, it's weird because the first, I would say, like 30 minutes, basically before Sarah Connor shows up, I would say the movie actually works pretty well. It understands what Terminator understood, what James Cameron understood, was that exposition has to be delivered amidst action, amidst movement. So when Mackenzie Davis's character shows up and they're kind of setting the stage for what is to come, it's all happening amidst action and amidst set pieces and car chases where she's kind of explaining the world to the characters that don't know about it. And then the movie just kind of stops. After the introduction of Sarah Connor, the movie just like hits the brakes really hard. And suddenly we're just having these awful, boring conversations in like a hotel rooms and then later in the movie again at like Carl, Arnold Schwarzenegger's farm that he lives, because they've contrived this thing. Well, because Skynet was destroyed, and that the new thing is this thing called Legion. This new AI that developed was called Legion. That's the thing that destroys the world. But Skynet was destroyed, so the T-1000 that Arnold Schwarzenegger plays, his name is Carl, and he no longer has like a prime directive. He no longer has that focus because that doesn't exist anymore because John and Sarah did away with it. So he's able to kind of develop a personality, develop humanity, become, utilize his thinking machine and learn about the world and kind of like form some type of humanity and empathy. And he's been working behind the scenes, sending Sarah Connor text messages about where Terminators would show up in the timeline so she could go and kill them. It's bad, folks. It's not good. I don't know what the fuck were they thinking when they wrote that? It's so hacky. I mean, I guess they were just like, well, we got to find a way to put Arnold in here. I don't, just to have him connected to Sarah Connor in that way was very strange. I think the decision to kind of do a greatest hits of Terminator, a kind of like an amalgamation of the other two movies was a mistake. Like if they had just done a movie that focused on Sarah Connor, older Sarah Connor, and her feelings of guilt and disassociation from society and what motivated that. Like you could have killed John, and she could have still kind of grew into being the badass that, the quote unquote badass that you see in this movie. But if it had focused on that stuff and it focused on her life, kind of in the same way that something like James Mangold did with Wolverine and Logan, just have it be about her, have it be about that. But instead of that, they've made this like kind of new Sarah Connor character, and then it has to be kind of politically correct and socially right, and they had to make it so this new person is not going to birth the next John Connor. She is the next John Connor, and it's just so painful. It's just so painful. It's just so weak and contrived and stupid. And because I was excited to watch a movie about Sarah Connor coming back, right? Because like I said, I think there's a story there. I think there's actually something to talk about, and talking about, even in a meta sense, about aging action stars and legacy, and what doesn't matter, right? The things that you've done. If you think about what Sarah Connor and John Connor did, like what they have done, nobody would ever know, because the things that they stopped don't come to pass, right? It would have been really interesting to explore that with her character. They have no interest in doing that here. It is all very linear and binary and not interesting. And Arnold Schwarzenegger coming back, I don't know what the fuck the deal is, but they've done this since Terminator 3. Rise of the Machines. He's become like comic relief for these movies. And it's very strange. It's very strange, especially like in this movie. It's very strange. Like, I don't know why they felt it necessary to do that to his character. They kind of make him a joke. They want to make him a big teddy bear. They want to evoke the same feelings you had about the T-1000 at the end of Terminator 2. And and they want to take these shortcuts to do so you feel like it's the same character even though it's not. I don't know why they did that. I don't know why they, even just in the context of the movie they made, like I don't know why they did that. I don't know why he isn't slightly more of a questionable or even menacing presence, and what motivated him to help Sarah Connor all these years finding the other Terminators. They don't really get into that at all, other than the sense that he kind of develops a sense of self and guilt. And it's all done and over with within a 2-minute conversation. Where something like that feels like it should be the theme of the movie, I think it was a mistake to make this kind of an ensemble piece, I wish they had, like I said, kind of stuck with the perspective of Sarah Connor, and maybe she has this kind of dicey relationship with this Carl Terminator. Maybe that was the thrust of it, and maybe he is keyed into something, or they discover this idea of Legion, and they discover this idea of this new hero, this new savior. Maybe that could have been the movie. It was actually finding her and saving her, and then have Mackenzie Davis's character actually be the villain, be this, and keep intact her character, keep intact the idea that she's like mostly human, but augmented with cyborg shit. Yeah, that's what we'll say. We'll say cyborg shit. It's late, guys. It's late. It's almost 12 o'clock at night. I've had a few drinks. Talking about fucking Terminator Dark Fate. But you could have done that, right? Because then they would have left open all these other possibilities for what this new future is. Instead of making the future that comes to pass exactly the same as the Skynet future, what if there was something more dicey about like humanity's involvement and the darker side of the future, right? That would have been interesting. And if she had been like the new Liquid Terminator, she had been the new villain, that would have been really interesting. See, I'm thinking about this. I'm game theorying this stuff, and I'm blowing my own mind. That would have been really, really interesting. And having like this, I don't know. Maybe it's because of the Christiana Loken from Terminator 3 that they wouldn't do something like that. Maybe that was something that motivated their decision making. I don't know. But I mean, obviously they didn't even go into what I'm talking about. But that would have been an actual interesting modern twist on Terminator. If humanity is also part of the problem, part of the and in a more direct way, where they literally, the machines and the humans, the hybrids that come from the future, are actually implicated in the terrible nature of the future. And maybe you could have even have had her character develop to come to have some sort of sense of empathy or whatever. Those would have been way more interesting. And like having Sarah Connor having to work with a Terminator that killed her son, do it more than just in the last 45 minutes of the movie. Make it the movie. Make it what the movie's about the cycles of violence and revenge and the future and doing the right thing and what does that mean. But no, we just got a very standard, very boilerplate action movie, science fiction action movie. That's a bummer, man. It's a bummer. Terminator Dark Fate is a bummer. Because if you go back, like I said earlier, if you go back and listen to that old Zoobox episode, I was kind of like, well, it's like passively entertaining. I wasn't really too bad. I wasn't really too harsh on it. But watching it again, you realize kind of what a misfire it is and what a slog it is. And it's interesting because of all the press that came out around it, and then the kind of the fallout of the movie not doing very well. Tim Miller very defensive about it. And then I thought about the movie he made before this. I thought about Deadpool. And I thought about what made Deadpool work. It's Ryan Reynolds. It's nothing to do with his direction whatsoever. Because that is another kind of standard, almost boilerplate superhero movie. And Ryan Reynolds and the character of Deadpool is the X factor. Now, I don't want to take the entire credit away from him. I think but it's not his direction that sets it over the top or makes it memorable. And in Terminator Dark Fate, he really proved that he is just not that kind of visionary, which is a shame. Like, if you get all these people together and you do something like this and you don't deliver, that's a bummer. So I can understand his defensiveness, but he kind of leaned into the whole political correctness, anti-SJW, people saying, oh, people were attacking the movie and they're anti-feminist, and like, he gave people cartoon two-dimensional female characters. You didn't do anything great for females or the feminist movement. That's not what this movie represents, and to suggest that it does is a little shitty, a little stupid, in my opinion. Because you could have. I mean, you have Sarah Connor in your fucking movie. Make a movie about Sarah Connor. The insecurity on the part of the storytellers about not wanting to tell a story about an old woman trying to make peace with her life is actually the downfall of the movie. Because if you had something like that, if you had kind of the stronger thematic element, if you had a stronger through line with the characters, this could have worked. Granted, like I said, I think if you just give Mackenzie Davis the villain role, you make it the focus Linda Hamilton and the relationship with Carl, if that and them hunting Terminators, and it's kind of dubious and they're shady and she doesn't know to trust him or not, I think that would have been way more interesting, because it would have also added this kind of ethical layer that maybe Sarah Connor would have to deal with. Like, have her know that who is sending her this information. Don't have her be some fucking moron that's getting random anonymous text messages and then just executing on those text messages. That doesn't make any sense. That's silly. That's contrived. That's awful. That's awful writing, fellas. David S. Goyer. Buddy. Can you just be good once without having to have a director actually make your material good? I don't want to throw it on David S. Goyer, but he's got a history. Okay, folks? He's got a history. You ever see Blade Trinity? The man's got a history. Yeah. It's a shame too because there's a lot of stuff that here that works. I think pretty well. Like I said, I think the set pieces work pretty well. I think Mackenzie Davis is actually pretty good. I think that character is much more interesting as a villain. Diego Luna as the new baddie Terminator, he's okay. He's a little too anonymous for me. I know that they, back in T2 they actually hired Robert Patrick because they thought like, well, looks like a guy that could blend in. He looks like an everyman, like a guy you would see on the street. But Robert Patrick has some kind of enigmatic presence that Diego Luna just does not. And that is iconic immediately. The first time you see it, you understand that it's iconic. It just feels that way. It feels like cinema history. And it's impactful and memorable. Diego Luna, like, shit, 10 minutes after you watch this movie, you might forget that he was in the movie. You might forget all about him. I would say the same thing with the Danny character, the Natalie Reyes. She's not great either, and it's not even entirely her fault. Like I said at the beginning, like they just did not have good material to work with, and the whole movie suffers for it. They're just not given anything as performers to work with, and her character is incredibly one note. She turns on a dime in the third act just to be more heroic and more put together. And she's supposed to parallel kind of Sarah Connor's character and then become kind of a John Connor character in the future version of John Connor. And you just do not buy it at all. I mean, Sarah Connor had 2 movies, She had you go back and watch the original Terminator, she's just a regular woman. She's just a regular lady, regular girl, young woman. She's a waitress. And then by the time you see what happens to her in Terminator 2 and everything she's gone through with this paranoia and this knowledge of what is to come, you believe it, you buy it. But like I said, she had 2 movies to explore that. And, and Linda Hamilton famously had always said, like, well, I think I kind of completed Sarah Connor's arc. There isn't really much left to explore with that character. And she was 100% right. I wish she didn't come. I wish that she did not come back to do this. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not a type of person that, like, really, like, gets, like, the old performances are there, the old movies are there. But there was something kind of cool that she had withheld coming back to this franchise for so long. It's almost like she knew that it didn't need to be. There's just nothing there to explore. And anything you do after the way that Terminator 2 ends, anything you do after that is just going to undermine Terminator 2. And that's a mistake, in my opinion. It's a goddamn mistake. Gotta have a little drink of poo just to get through this. Just to talk about this. It's very painful for me. This is my childhood. My formative years. Movie like this. What's funny though? I was thinking after I watched this, I was like, how did Terminator Salvation end up being the best sequel? It's directed by fucking Mick G. By Mick G. And somehow it ends up being the best one. It's the only one that has anything even remotely interesting to say. It actually has some balls relative to things like Terminator 3, Genesis, and Dark Fate. Shit, I'd rather watch Terminator 3. Terminator 3 is not like a good Terminator movie, but I would say it's like a better Terminator movie than this. And it's like, so it's bad, but it's also very watchable. Terminator Dark Fate is almost like kind of boring. I was almost kind of bored. I can't wait to watch the commentary though. Because that's the kind of weirdo I am. I'm like, I did not like that movie at all. I cannot wait to spin that commentary. I am very curious. I doubt I know Tim Miller is a professional. He wants to work again, so I'm sure he's not going to get into any of the behind the scenes stuff. But the post production of this apparently was a nightmare, and apparently it's because of Jimmy Cameron. Jimmy Cameron knows best, and he wanted more control. than Tim Miller wanted to give him. Tim Miller had his own vision. James Cameron had his. They always didn't see eye to eye. Apparently it was like a bloodbath in the editing bay. Release the Tim Miller cut. Release the Miller cut. Let's do it. Let's get this hashtag going. Let's see what Terminator Dark Fate was supposed to be. I'm curious. I'm curious whether or not this had a different kind of intent or tone. I'm thinking probably not too different, but I could see James Cameron coming in and wanting it to be broader and being kind of like an old boomer. Like, if you go watch something like Avatar, okay, that's like an old man's version of a cool story, of an interesting story. So James Cameron has not been like super interesting since like True Lies. It's like the last like good James Cameron movie. So what do you do after the? Is it just Titanic and Avatar? It might be. But True Lies, I would say, is kind of the end of James Cameron as I appreciate James Cameron. So I do definitely question his sensibilities in the modern era, and he seems preoccupied with, I don't know, like proselytizing, messaging movies. Like, I was really happy that, what's his name? Robert Rodriguez did Alita Battle Angel, which seems like he was trying to execute on something like Cameron's vision for sure, trying to do Cameron's version of the movie, but he brings his own flair to it, his own Rodriguez flair to it. I actually really enjoy Alita Battle Angel. I don't think it's going to be for everybody, and I don't think it's a perfect movie by any means, but I think it's pretty fun, and it did not get its just desserts when in theater. No, because I mean, that's the thing. Like, I would love for one of these franchises, whether it was Terminator, whether it's Alita Battle Angel, if they could just kind of get into the fold, get into the fray with these fucking superhero movies, with these fucking Marvel movies. I'm mostly talking about the Marvel movies. But get in there and just kind of unseat one of these fuckers so they can slow down on those movies. We don't need 10 of them a year. That's the silver lining of COVID, is that I don't have to see 3 Marvel movies this year. Well, I probably wouldn't have seen them. So I still haven't watched, what is it, Captain Marvel? I still haven't watched that one. I think that's the only one I haven't seen. Maybe Ant-Man and the Wasp. I don't think I've ever finished it. Because when you're just a genre fan, you're somewhat like feel obligated to watch this stuff, and getting older, you're just like, no, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't care if I don't understand. I'm just not going to watch them at all. If that's what it takes, I'm just not going to watch them at all. After the Marvel movies, after the modern Star Wars movies, I'm just like out. I am so checked out of this stuff. And, but, I bought this. I bought it. Oh my goodness. Stuff's falling. But I bought this, I own all of the other ones. I have to. I'm one of these people, like, in my brain, it would have bothered me. I look at the shelf. I've been looking at my shelf since this came out on Blu-ray, and I'm like, fuck, I need to get that at some point. And it finally dropped to a reasonable price, and I was like, this is the time. And then I found out it had an audio commentary. Totally going to get that. Totally going to watch it. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to hear more about Zoobox, if you'd like to keep up to date with everything Zoobox, there'll be a bunch of links in the description for Facebook, for Instagram, and for my personal Twitter. If there is a movie you would like to hear me talk about in these daily videos, or even maybe perhaps you'll make it onto the main show, Zoobox Goes to the Movies, leave a comment, and I will get around to it as soon as I can. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we will see you tomorrow.